Hey, Clayton, I'm curious about the scapegoat in Leviticus 16. Was the idea of a scapegoat around in their culture before God introduced this ceremony? How does the scapegoat apply to us now? Is there some equivalent to the scapegoat in the New Testament? It's a good question. Okay, let me explain what the scapegoat is for those of you who aren't familiar or haven't read the middle of Leviticus in a little while. Okay, in Leviticus 16, I believe I don't have it in front of me. We have the description of the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement was once a year. It was a national event where the high priest would, the one time a year, they would go into the Holy of Holies, the most holy place at the center of the tabernacle, and they would make an offering there to cleanse the entire tabernacle and people, basically saying all of our year of sin and uncleanness, we're going to take care of that once and for all, cleanse all of the uncleanness that came from this past year. And the way the ceremony worked is there were actually two goats that were selected, okay? So there are two goats. One was selected to be the offering, the purification offering that would go into the tabernacle. The other one was actually sent out of the camp. Okay, so the one that was the offering is pretty straightforward. That was the blood to purify what was going on. But the one sent out of the camp was a way of sending out of the camp all of the impurities, so the sin, the impurity of the past year. And that goat is in English called the scapegoat. So you've probably heard that term, probably not in this context, the scapegoat. Now, the Hebrew word that's there is a curious word, okay? The word that's translated scapegoat is azazel. Okay, so it's called the Azazel goat. And the question is, what does Azazel mean? And the honest answer is, we're not quite sure. Okay, there are three main options that it could be. Okay, it could be that this is a proper name, that Azazel is the name of some sort of goat demon in the wilderness. A lot of people propose this. They say what you're doing is you're offering something to God, but you're sending all your junk out to this some evil force out there. There are some reasons for this in context that make some sense, but I got to say, it seems a little odd that God would involve in his ceremony some sort of goat demon or deity and send some goat of impurities out to them. It just seems a little strange, but scholars have said, well, there are some reasons why this could potentially be what's going on. The second explanation is the word could mean something like a rough and difficult place. There is a similar word in Arabic that means something like that. And so it could be that we don't know exactly what this word meant, but it's related to that word. And so the word would just mean wilderness. So the wilderness goat would be what it is. It could be that this is a compound word. Azazel would be a compound word for the word that means goat and the word that means disappear in Hebrew. And so it means something like the goat that departs. So you translate the verses there. You say there's one goat for the Lord and one is the departure goat. And so some people look at that and they say, I think that's what it means. In fact, this is where we get the English word scapegoat. The English word scapegoat was invented by one of the very first English translators of the Bible, a guy named William Tyndale. He was translating. He was one of the first people to translate the Bible into English directly from the Greek and the Hebrew, the original languages of the Bible. And that meant that there were times when he was translating words that he didn't have a perfect English equivalent for. So there are words that he just made up to try to capture the concept, even though we didn't have an English word. One of those words was the word atonement. So we use that all the time. He actually coined that word so that we could explain some things in the Bible. Scapegoat is a similar one. He looked at this and said, the departure goat, the scapegoat, right? Like it's escaping. So we ended up with the word scapegoat. But here's the truth. We don't know definitively which of those meanings it could be. The purpose is clear enough. The priest laid his hands on the goat, confessed the sins of the people, and then sent the goat away. You don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to be a scholar to figure out what that symbolizes, right? It's meant to represent and embody the removal of all of our sins and all of our impurities from the people, to send them out of the camp so that God can continue to dwell in our midst. The goat is exiled. The goat is cut off so that we can remain inside with God. This is a gift to the people, that we can continue to live with God, that the Israelites continue to have God's presence in their midst. But there's a danger when we make scapegoats of people or groups that are not meant to bear the blame for society. This is a thing that's happened over the course of history, where there has been societies where they have found individuals or smaller groups within their society and said, you know what's wrong with the world? You know who we should blame for all of our problems here? It's that group of people. This is where the idea of scapegoating in the more common sense that we use it today comes from. And you say, they're the ones who need to be punished. They're the ones who need to be sent out. They're the ones who need to be exiled or cut off from us or excluded from us because they're the ones who cause all the problems. This is at the root of all sorts of horrendous things that have happened through history, from the petty things that happen within a workplace or a school to the grand and terrible things like the Holocaust and ethnic cleansing and things like this. So the question that the person asked, though, is there any scapegoat for us now? Is there some equivalent of that for people now in the New Testament era? And the answer is yes and no, okay? There is a scapegoat, and it's Jesus, okay? In fact, Jesus actually embodies both of the goats in this Day of Atonement ceremony. He is the purification offering. He's the one who makes it so that we can be cleansed and go into God's presence, that he cleanses the temple of God's people and makes it so that God can dwell with us. That is part of his role. It symbolizes him, but he's also the goat that goes outside the camp, who bears our sin on him and takes the sin away. The book of Hebrews emphasizes how Jesus went out of the camp. He was sent out as something unclean. He bore our guilt and shame and took it away. And so both of these things, Jesus is fulfilling those functions, which means we do have a scapegoat. It's Jesus, but it also means we don't need a scapegoat anymore. We don't need that kind of ceremony. If you're feeling guilty with sin, if you're feeling weighed down by shame, we don't need to do something to physically take away our sin. We've got Jesus for that. What we need is to get the sin out in the light. We need to confess it, bring it into the open, because it is valuable to hear what is already true, that Jesus has extended grace, paid for that sin, and by bringing it out, we get to hear anew that this is true. Now, there is some value from time to time in symbols that point out the way sin is removed from us. I've been in different church services and ceremonies. Maybe you've been in these sorts of things where you write your sin on a piece of paper and you do something with it, right? You'll nail it to a cross and say, it's done. I'm giving it to Jesus, right? Or you put it on paper and you burn the paper and it's like, this is gone. Now, those things don't actually remove your sin, but they help you visualize and embody something that is already true because of what Jesus has done.
Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.